Good morning, everyone. Uh, Today I'll be talking about freedom of speech on the internet, an area that is quite close to my heart. First, a quick summary of what all I will cover. I'll talk about why freedom of speech is important, what laws regulate speech in India and internationally, and how this is something that might be different online. So first off, why exactly is free speech important according to you guys? Anyone at all? I'll pass it along.
I think it's the basis where you base all communication on. If you take away freedom of expression, then it becomes like any other space, which is extremely restrictive and will not allow for experiential development. And I think it's required for something like the internet, which is by nature open source, to have freedom of speech, especially the internet, I would say.
And you said experiential development and for communications
Absolutely.
with other people. Okay, any other reasons that speech might be an important right? Why do we protect it as a human right when things like hunger is much more basic at many levels? Why do we wish to protect speech?
Probably because it's a medium by which you can communicate your deprival of other rights. If your other rights are getting violated, that's the most basic medium that you'll go to express your deprivation.
That's an excellent reason, and you see that it's in a way a different kind of reason. One is about an intrinsic value of speech, okay, that it allows you to communicate, it allows you development. And another is that it facilitates other rights. Any other reasons that we can think of?
Also, one way of ensuring that it's a kind of ensuring there is democracy. Otherwise, it's like somebody can smother my voice and say it's like, and we can be under a very bad political dispensation if we don't have freedom of expression.
Excellent. So it's very important for democratic functioning as well. Apart from being able to talk about other rights being deprived, it's a core part of our democratic polity. So I'll start off with a story about the 3 bitter years from 1958 to 62 in China. Amartya Sen talks about this in a set of lectures and in his book Development as Freedom, where he explains that no matter how poor in a democratic country, we have never seen famines in the past 100 years. But in non-democratic countries, especially in situations where freedom of speech has been restricted, we have seen famine. So this was a famine where between an estimated 15 to 45 million people died in China prematurely. Now, there was a reduction in food production. There was drought. But there were also lots of situations where there was enough grain, but it wasn't given to the right people. Okay? So people, especially in the urban areas, did not face much of a problem, whereas people in rural areas did. And this also coincided with the Great Leap Forward, which started in 1958. But Amartya Sen points out that this lack of information, okay, of real information, was a big problem because people wanted to please their bosses. So everyone reported that they had this much production of grain, okay, and lied in their official reports. And because there is no opposition parties, because there was no independent press, no one was able to actually challenge those figures and say, actually, wait a second, that isn't the official production in this region. We need more grain from elsewhere. Okay. So, whereas in India, since we gained independence, we actually haven't seen a famine. There are two kinds of theories about freedom of speech, both of which already came up. One is the value theory, which is that inherently there is something valuable about being able to express yourself. It benefits the speaker, there is the freedom, it allows for freedom of thought and conscience, and it allows for growth of people. That it's something we can't live without. The second is the instrumentality theory, right? That it is it's a core right because it enables other rights, that all sorts of other rights wouldn't quite exist if you didn't have freedom of speech to say, wait a second, this other right is being trampled upon. In a way, to draw an analogy, another very important right guaranteed in the Indian Constitution is the right to petition the Supreme Court when any of your other rights has been infringed. Okay? So that right, Article 32 of the Constitution, is in the legal framework the kind of thing that freedom of speech is at a larger societal level, where you can say that other rights are being infringed or other rights are not being fulfilled by the state or by other people. And apart from its importance in democracies and in establishing the truth, there is also commercial speech which we protect. The question, though, remains: should everyone have this right equally? And this is something that comes up with the internet, right? That some people who don't know how to speak in a polite fashion, okay, are being unleashed on the internet and are messing things up, and we need to have regulations for that. So and historically, everyone has not had the right to speak equally. Historically, we see that it's only in around the mid 20th century that this becomes a fashionable idea, that everyone, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of caste, regardless of any other kind of difference, has this right. A quick question: what kinds of laws do you believe regulate speech in India? Can you name laws? How many of you have a legal training? How many of you are still unable to name laws if you have a legal training? So any guesses?
Does freedom of press include there?
Yes, so I'll come to that in a minute, but yeah, so what all restricts speech, whether of the press, of people, etc. in India? Article 19 of the Article 19 1A of the Constitution of India. Article? 19.2, I think, is another.
I don't know the number of the article, but there's one that if you offend public sensibilities, it's not allowed. I mean, that's what.
So we've kind of covered the Constitution now. Anything else? Defamation. That's both exists independent of criminal law and in criminal law. So there's normal defamation and then there's criminal defamation. And any other reasons that we restrict speech? Any other laws that we have? Uh, 144 of the IPC, and or even if there isn't an emergency, as we often see is the case, but that also does restrict speech. You're right. Okay, so the foundation for freedom of speech in India is the Constitution of India. So the Constitution says very broadly that all citizens shall have the right to freedom of speech and expression. Okay, it's a very, very, very broad statement. Okay, it doesn't restrict it to certain set of citizens, doesn't mention the press. Press, as long as it is owned by a citizen, or as long as citizens participate in producing newspaper, is also covered by it according to interpretation of the Supreme Court. So it's a and very interestingly, unlike in other countries, our law does not say the government shall not restrict freedom of speech and expression of citizens. Okay, it actually frames it positively that all citizens shall have this. So there is a possibility that this can be used not just against the government not infringing it, but the government actually helping promote freedom of speech in India, saying that there is a positive obligation on the government to promote freedom of speech, not just a negative obligation to not infringe on it. And then, of course, which something that a large number of people brought up, Article 19.2, which says, which has a few important points. Okay, one, we see that it allows for exceptions. Okay, and it assigns 8 different reasons for these exceptions. 1, sovereignty and integrity of India, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, decency or morality, or in relation to contempt of court, defamation, or incitement to an offense. All in all, 8. But the kinds of restrictions this applies are quite interesting. It says that it has to be a law. So the government can't just restrict these without the existence of a law, or without actually making a law. So it can't just pass an executive order saying there is security of the state is threatened, so now you can't have freedom of speech. There has to be a law that allows the government to do that. One very important point. Another very important point is this of reasonable restrictions. This actually came about as an amendment to the Constitution. Earlier, the restrictions weren't required to be reasonable, but in 1951, the first amendment to the Constitution, that word was added, and certain categories such as friendly relations with foreign states, etc., were also added. Now I'll come to the reason why in a minute, but it's the existence of the word reasonable there is very important, because the courts have very often, surprisingly often, said that fine, this is a restriction, but it is not a reasonable one. Okay, and you as Parliament or you as the government are not allowed to impose this kind of an unreasonable restriction. Yeah.
When we talk about any existing law, does it refers to state law or the central law?
It refers to both kinds of laws, and of course this is in reference to pre-independence laws, right? So it's not. So when we gained independence, all existing laws carried forward insofar as they were in line with the Constitution. So and this applies to all laws at all levels. And yeah, so that's a very important point. And there's an interesting story. One of the first cases to go up to the Supreme Court in 1950, the year that the Constitution of India was adopted, was that of Ramesh Thapar versus State of Madras. So what happened was that simultaneously, immediately after independence, we had speech that was sought to be banned both from the left wing and from the right wing. Okay, and the right wing press was at that point of time talking about how we shouldn't give money to Pakistan. Okay, and it was interestingly to protect our relations with Pakistan that the friendly relations with foreign states was introduced into the Indian Constitution. Okay, and Thankfully, it doesn't say relations with friendly foreign states. It shouldn't have included Pakistan, right? And the second is that from the left wing, again, there were lots of problems. And in both these cases, which went up to the Supreme Court, the court held that the laws that allowed for banning of the speech were ultra vires the Constitution, meaning that they were not in conformity with the Constitution, and they struck down those laws. So less than a year from when the Constitution was adopted, existing laws were being struck down. This is in stark contrast to the way things were in the US, okay, where the Constitution was adopted, 1790 or so, or in the 1780s, and then we finally have the first laws of any sort being struck down by the US Supreme Court only around the 1920s. Okay? And in India, in less than a year, they were already being struck down. And apart from the Constitution, which allows for the creation of laws, you actually need the laws, right? So there are actually many more laws than you think. Okay? There is, of course, the stuff that people know about, the Indian Penal Code, which covers under speech stuff relating to decency, morals, religion, defamation, intimidation, insult, criminal annoyance, etc. And as an example of the kinds of things that are covered by this, there is section 508, which talks about inducing a person to believe that he will be rendered an object of divine displeasure. This is, of course, the Indian Penal Code is 1860, and this hasn't still been removed. Okay? And this is an actual example from the law. Okay? It says, an example 1, okay, A sits in Dharna at Z's door with the intention of causing it to be believed that Z will be rendered the object of divine displeasure, that some famine or pestilence will come upon Z's door, and doing so, saying that God is going to punish you because of me, is actually an offense under the Indian Penal Code. Okay, so sorry? It's not even misinformation, because it's not that you have to believe that this is untrue. Okay? You might actually believe that by sitting outside Z's door and by sitting on the Dharna, that God will punish him. Okay? So even if you actually believe that, okay, this will still apply, as long as you're doing it with the intention of doing this.
So if I understand this right, somebody who believes in, say, A religion can be jailed for telling somebody of B religion that this will offend my God?
More or less, not. No, no. So it's not no, but the blasphemy provisions are different, because there are blasphemy-like provisions in Indian law around section 295, 295A, etc. Okay, deal with situations of blasphemy. But what he said is not about blasphemy; is about things saying that my God will punish you, okay, for not believing in this religion, okay, and that, okay, rendered the object of divine displeasure. Okay, it does actually cover that. Okay, so.
Those people who went to really saying like, okay, God will punish you because you have been so.
This was actually meant to protect. The way the British envisioned it in the land of, you know, of the illiterate and those who don't know anything about anything. Okay, someone saying that will actually cause a big problem. Okay, that God will punish you will cause a big problem. Okay, so this is meant as a very paternalistic way of protecting people against protecting illiterate and unknowledgeable people. Okay.
So I'm absolved of this if I sit outside my tenants because he's not paid me rent? Is that because it's nothing to do with divine?
Yes. So if you just sitting on a dharna does not get covered by this, and thankfully, very thankfully, more or less. Okay, so we have very archaic laws on our books still, and apart from that, we have laws that are, only used once in a while. Things like the Young Persons Harmful Publications Act 1956, which is only ever used against celebrities. Okay, so if you have a case involving Khushbu, okay, this is invoked. If you have a case involving Rima Sen, okay, this is invoked. Okay, this is again a law that prohibits you from publishing anything that that will harm young people. Now, the problem with this is that the Supreme Court of India has never actually seen a case involving this law. Okay, but in a separate case, in a 2005 case, they actually held in a case relating to newspapers that publishing something that might harm young people, such as page 3 coverage that is so popular in so many newspapers, is actually not something that can be prohibited by the court or by the government. And because they got a PIL saying, wait a second, all these newspapers are publishing all these scantily clad women, okay, and that should be prohibited. And the government said no. The Supreme Court said no, that actually is not possible under Indian law. So we do have court judgments that go against existing statutes, okay, and yet those statutes still remain on the law books of India. Okay, similarly, we just around 2 months ago, we had the Madras High Court striking down a Tamil Nadu law relating to public performances, okay, and requiring licenses for that from the government, okay, and that has been in the paper books for more than 50 years now. Okay, it was a 1958 law, if I remember right. Okay, but just that no one actually challenged that law till date. So that's the other interesting feature of the Indian legal system, that we have laws that many people think are unconstitutional, but because no one has actually gone to a high court or the Supreme Court challenging it, okay, and those are the only two kinds of courts that can take a constitutional challenge, these laws are still on the paper books, right? Yeah.
Recently, Madras High Court prevented a political party, from holding a meeting Nadia, even before a word was uttered, thinking that they might create communal disharmony. So even before the speech is made, free or non-free, there was a court decision against the party's desire to hold a meeting. Where does it come in?
So what we have also seen, so that's the other important aspect, feature of our legal system, that there is no uniformity in any of this. So we have seen, for instance, that from films that, from films that have been created in India, music videos, okay, from those films has been banned by the Madras High Court again, okay, in 2010 December, and it banned, 2011 December, and it banned a channel called SS Music for 1 week from broadcasting, okay, in March 2012. Okay, for broadcasting stuff that already is being broadcast on other channels and already is available in India, okay, and this was being done after 11 p.m. at any rate.
And this.
So we just a second. So we have stuff like that. We have situations where Murli Manohar Joshi, okay, was accused of inciting communal hatred and violence and urging people, to along those lines. And yet the Supreme Court finally found that he hadn't violated the Indian Penal Code. Okay, so we have both kinds of extremes coming out from courts. Okay, and very unfortunately, courts, given the number of cases that they deal with, okay, which is very large in India, and we have very few judges to deal with that number of cases, okay, don't do a very good job in being uniform in applications of the laws. Okay, and this is even at the level of the high courts. Okay, which is why we have so many cases where from the high court it goes to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court overrules it. Okay, sorry, you had a question?
Just asking, this Young Persons Harmful Publications Act, does it define what harm means? Or it can be anything.
No, it doesn't define harm, but it does define what specific kinds of publications will be considered, like, will be prescribed. So it's not as broad as the title makes it seem. Okay, it is more restrictive than that. Okay, but the fact is it's almost never used. Okay, and no one knows about it. No one follows it. Okay, so and we have other kinds of remnants of older British Raj laws, such as the Press and Registration of Books Act. Okay, which actually requires newspapers and books published in India to be registered with the government of India. Okay, and these kinds of and this is very surprising, where at the international level, folks like UNESCO have argued repeatedly that even journalists, okay, shouldn't be required to be registered with the government. Okay, that is what UNESCO argues. At the same time, this is what we have. And this is a remnant from the British era. And even now, when the government is looking at, at overhauling this law and passing a new law, okay, they are keeping many of the core features. And they're actually adding new features, such as, thinking of adding new features, such as including the internet and online publications and online newspapers, etc., within this. How one would, and this is done without defining what an online newspaper is, just because it includes that medium. And so it's, things like this still pose challenges to free speech in India. Then there are, of course, things which are very contentious, okay, with people arguing on both sides. Things like indecent representation of women, Women's Act. Things like, the Prevention of Atrocities against Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Persons Act. Okay, so there are lots of these kinds of things which, at least in the Prevention of Atrocities Act, it might be a little bit more limited. Okay, the kind of offense, the kind of bar that you need to cross in terms of offense is a very high one. But under the Indecent Representations of Women Act, okay, it's a very low one. Okay, so lots of what we see around is actually stuff that is made criminal, okay, under the Indecent Representation of Women Act. Okay, and so so there is that other problem of laws actually being on the books but not being followed and not being revised, and there not being a public debate around it to ask for revision of laws that that aren't being followed, or saying that we should either follow this or that we should change it to accord with what society generally practices. And of course, there's the Information Technology Act 2000, the Information Technology Rules 2011, etc. And there are more than 30 laws at just the central level that regulate speech, and at the state level there are many more. Okay, so I haven't at all covered this, but just wanted to give you a sampling. Anyone have any ideas about what laws cover regulation of speech internationally? What treaties? What covenants? Okay, so we have two. One is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is not a treaty. This is just a declaration done under the aegis of the United Nations. But it holds a very high place in international law, meaning that while countries are not bound by it, so if they don't follow it, there is no repercussion really, but everyone is expected to follow it if they are a UN member state. Okay? Which in Article 19 talks about everyone having the right to freedom of opinion and expression, that this right includes the freedom to hold opinions without interference, to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media, regardless of frontiers. So this, I think, is a very important point, regardless of frontiers. Okay, and this applies very easily to the internet. Okay. Apart from this, the other important point that this highlights, but which is included in Indian law through interpretation, is that it's not only to speak, but also to seek, receive, and receive information as well, not just to impart information. Okay, so that's another very important part of freedom of speech, is that it, in India, includes the freedom to receive information, not just to provide information. Okay, so freedom of speech includes access to other people's speech. Okay, and this is held by multiple Supreme Court judgments. And this is explicitly stated in international law as well. And apart from that, there's the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which a very large percentage of all UN member states have signed. So Article 19, again, by coincidence, of the ICCPR states exactly this. And in addition, it says that the exercise of the rights provided for, etc., okay, can be subject to certain restrictions, but importantly, it lays down principles, okay, where in India we say reasonable. Okay, we include these principles by in a way, but here it actually states it explicitly. One, that it has to be provided by law, and two, that it is necessary, and it only includes these limited exceptions. Okay, rights and reputations of others, protection of national security or public order, and for protection of health and morals. Okay. Oops. And Article 20 also includes a restriction. Okay, so Article 19 includes the kinds of things that you're allowed to exclude, whereas Article 20 includes certain restrictions, being propaganda for war, advocacy of national, religious, or racial hatred, and which constitutes incitement to discrimination, hostility, violence, etc. Okay, so it requires that this be prohibited by law. And this is a particular provision that, for instance, in the US, they have problems with, okay, because they say that this lowers the amount of freedom of speech we grant our citizens. Okay, and then there are exceptions in case of public emergencies as well. Now, freedom of speech online. What are the differences? Why should we bother about speech online? Isn't it just something that the elite have anyway? So how is freedom of speech different online? Any guesses? Any answers?
Because the internet is a mass communication medium, so whatever you say will reach a number of people. So that could actually be one of the reasons why it might influence or something like that.
Sure. Virality. Excellent, yeah.
People may not have access to the net to respond to something that has been said.
Excellent. So defamation, for instance, once it's been put out there, how do you ensure that, at least in a newspaper, you can get it to apologize? Okay, what do you do online? How do you present your counter view?
Also, I think lack of ownership is also there online, because once something goes on the internet, nobody really can pinpoint where it came from in most cases.
Okay, so the possibility of anonymity and speech not being traceable. Okay, let me start off with let me just do a kind of experiment. So when was the first time that any of you was published? So the first time that any of you were able to put down something in writing, or in any other media, okay, affix something to a media, produce a film or put something down in writing or something that more than 10 people were able to see. 9 school magazine, school magazine. Sorry? A technical paper. So your first publication was in a technical paper. Okay. Wow. Gotten. Okay, would be either if you're a prodigy, then writing into Reader's Digest, or by writing letters to editors, right? Now think about this. Since 1947, how many people, let's say from 1947 to 1996, how many people do you think in India would have actually exercised those options? How many people would have written, if in press or in magazines or in something that had some kind of public readership? Think about that number. No need to tell me what it is. Now compare that number with the number of people you think would have had a chance to say something online to a broad readership from 1996 to 2013. Now if your thought process is anything like mine, it would seem to you that many more people have actually exercised in a period of around, 17 years, the option of saying something online to a larger public than have exercised from the 40s till now. Okay, so it actually does, when we think about things like democratizing speech, etc., while at an academic level, it is very easy to dismiss that, to say that the internet is still very elitist and whatnot. But you see that just in terms of just numbers, one very valuable point in democracies, that it actually does make a difference. And then two specific kinds of instances that we have also. How many of you know about the Section 66A controversies? Have heard about it, read about it, have heard about the Palghar girls? Let's have a show of hands. Okay, let's see how many people have not heard about Section 66A, never have read about it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, am I missing out anyone? 7. Okay. So how many of you know about the case where right after the death of Bal Thackeray last year, how many people know that Bal Thackeray is dead? Okay, that's more or less everyone. That's good. Okay. So anyone not know? Okay, great. So right after Bal Thackeray died, there were a couple of students who were arrested and for expressing the opinion that putting buns, etc., on the death of a person isn't the best way to commemorate that person's memory. And have you heard about this incident, even if you haven't heard about Section 66A? So the folks who put up their hands earlier for not having, you have heard about this incident, right? Okay, so the incident is famous, and I think that if I'd asked about, Section 508 of the Indian Penal Code, no one would have put up their hands. But Section 66A, a large number of people put up their hands because it was also for the first time that the media actually focused on a particular section as having caused a problem with freedom of speech, or even a particular law. Mostly when you read editorials and stuff talking about freedom of speech, they talk about it in a very abstract manner, or they talk about it in particular instances such as one movie being blocked or one book being banned, etc. But for the first time, we had at least since the 80s, with the defamation bill was contentious. Okay, since the 80s, I haven't come across a situation where in the media something else was discussed for which this large percentage of people would have put up their hands, saying, "I know something called Section 66A, okay, of some obscure law, some of the tens of thousands of laws that we have in India." And that, I think, is an important issue. I'll come to what 66A is later if we have time. And the other thing is that since 1996, we have had websites being blocked. And unfortunately, before 2008, there was no law that allowed the government to block, or until 2009 when the law was adopted and signed by President, we didn't have any law in India that was passed by Parliament which allowed for a website to be blocked. Yet from 1996 onwards at least, and these cases are documented sometimes through oral histories and sometimes through actual people trying to visit something and finding out that they can't. Okay, but we have had this happening, and so far we see that never has the government said the way when they ban a book, for instance, that's public. Okay, but so far when they ban a website, that order is never made public. That order goes from some authority, okay, earlier at one, and at different points it's been different authorities. Sometimes BSNL has just been directed by, at that point of time, it was VSNL directed by DOT to block a certain website, okay, and just told, and that happened. Okay, and then we've had from 2003 onwards, we had a situation where a body called the Indian Computer Emergency Response Team, okay, which is supposed to deal with hacker onslaught on Indian networks and stuff like that. We've had that being granted the power to block websites by directing the Department of Telecom to do so. And now finally we have a law passed by Parliament under which, under something called Section 69A of the IT Act, we have a situation where it actually follows a process, okay, where it has to be approved by someone at the level of secretary of the DIT, and only then can a website actually be blocked, unless it's a case of an emergency. Okay. Still the problem is, even after 2008, we still don't have the government actually telling us which websites are being blocked. And that's a big problem. The one good thing, however, the one saving grace in all of this, is that despite the orders from the Department of Telecom to ISPs actually mentioning that you shall not make this public, and despite the rules for the DOT, which the DOT has to follow, saying that that such requests for blocking shall be kept confidential. Despite this, when we have sent RTIs, okay, they have responded and given us lists of what websites they block. Okay, so that's the one saving grace of this. The another difference is that because of the internet is much more difficult to regulate. Okay? Because of the internet, free speech is at one level much more possible than it ever was earlier. Okay? Given the problems that the internet poses to jurisdiction, given that you only have jurisdiction over your own national borders, but speech is often made or spoken or written outside of Indian territory, so you can't order the person who on whose servers the speech is saved in a file to actually remove that file and to prevent others from accessing it. So which is why we use website blocking much more often. Okay. And also there are many more intermediaries, okay, which have their own terms of service. Okay, that's another big difference. So even in case of offline speech, we have many intermediaries whom you might not immediately realize. So there are things, everything from the printing press, okay, is what you can consider an intermediary, okay, between you and actually, the thing on print. Okay, everything from things like the printing press. In case of movies, we have theaters and movie halls. and even things you might not really think about, such as the people who import the newsprint. Okay, so those also act as intermediaries, and at different points of time, the government has gone after all of these. So in the 60s, okay, newsprint was regulated by the government, and that led to a famous series of cases, okay, in which the Supreme Court held that even restrictions on newsprint, okay, which were put for reasons of foreign exchange and because we had a big current account deficit at that point of time, okay, that even those kinds of limitations and saying that you can only print newspapers of these many pages, you can print whatever you want in that, but only these many pages and things like that, were unreasonable restrictions on freedom of press. Okay, so we have had those kinds of things, but so when I say that the government has targeted intermediaries, it's not the first time. Okay, but at least in the past it's been struck down. Okay, and in pre-internet times, there was to an extent less hassle of terms of use and contracts, etc. So it is easier to in a sense go to a printer and get something printed and they won't say these are our terms of service. Okay, if you want to, and if you want us to print it, then we should have the ability to remove this kind of content if you have written it. Okay, those kinds of terms aren't very common, whereas online we see that those kinds of terms are very common. Okay, so at one point of time, intermediaries would not have chosen certain kind of speech, okay, that you published in a larger book and excised it. Okay, they would have said, okay, this is too political for us, we are not going to approach it, but these are some other publishers who do political kind of work, but now the terms of contract become much more important than they ever were at an earlier point of time. The laws are different. Okay, the IT Act in many ways actually reduces the scope of freedom of speech in India. Okay, and that's a very important difference. So the situation with online speech is that all existing laws apply plus the IT Act. Of course, certain kinds of specialized laws might not apply. The Press and Books Registration Act, okay, might not apply. Okay, but all other laws which restrict speech do apply. All of the Indian Penal Code anyhow does apply. So when people say that speech shouldn't be any different online, okay, the fact is all these laws anyway do apply online. The only difference is there are more laws that apply online thanks to the IT Act. Okay, so that's something to be considered. And we also see online what I dub invisible censorship. So now I'll talk a little bit about the policy sting that CIS conducted. I already told you about how the government doesn't release lists of websites that it asks ISPs to block. But at least that is only translucent. That isn't invisible. Okay, you actually can query the government. You actually can send it an RTI and find out what is blocked. But in 2011, the government introduced a law called the Intermediary Guidelines Rules. Okay, what these do is what this set of rules does is that it allows anybody, okay, anybody at all who feels aggrieved by any kind of content online and agree for a certain set of reasons which are extremely broad, okay, and broad enough for even the government to agree in Parliament that this is way too broad and we will cut down on some words, and they haven't yet done so, but that's a different story. But it includes things like disparagement, okay, It includes, so disparagement under no existing law in India is an offense. Okay, I can call you names, okay, and that is not an offense. Okay, defamation, which is a very particular kind of legal category, okay, which involves without any basis reducing the reputation that someone has in the eyes of others. So there are actually, different, it's a 4-part test that has to be followed for establishing whether something is defamation or not. Disparagement is a word that's never existed, okay? But there is somewhere that disparagement exists. Can anyone guess where that is? It is prohibited online, but any guesses who prohibits it? Anyone at all? Where might you, go online where disparagement might be prohibited? Like insulting someone or yeah. So where might be somewhere? So there actually are a surprising number of terms of service. A number of services, including an online game called World of Warcraft, including one version of Yahoo's terms of service, etc. Okay, so the word disparagement does exist. So what the Indian government seems to have done is to have actually done some research. They've gone online, they've searched for terms of services of the one that I could find that is closest to what is included in that list is actually the World of Warcraft terms of service. Okay, and they've actually copied that and pasted it into Indian law. Okay, now you remember how I told you that Article 19(1) applies to the government, right? So the government actually can't prohibit under Indian legal framework many kinds of things that a private person can. Okay, so a private person can say, you can't talk about, like on my web service even, or in my house. Okay, if you want to come here in my house and chat, okay, we can't broach the topic of politics. Okay, I don't want anyone to talk about politics in my house. Okay, that you can say because you don't want, fractious disputes, etc., happening in your house. But the government cannot say that. Okay, the government, because of the Constitution of India, is prohibited from, restricting that kind of speech. Okay, so what we find is they've actually gone to a private provider who has the power to say on our servers, okay, this certain kind of speech. For instance, on many mailing lists, you have a rule saying no ad hominem attacks, that you can attack an idea, but don't attack people. Okay, don't call them names and stuff like that. Okay, so on many online forums, you have this kind of a rule. Okay, now, but the government of India cannot impose such a rule, and yet we find that they have, because they've just copy-pasted from existing terms of service and made it the law in India. Now, the other interesting, so what we did is we wanted to see, so how closely do intermediaries that are companies which are web hosts, which provide you hosting service, search engines, e-commerce websites that allow you to post something. Okay, so all of these, we decided to see whether they follow the law or not. Okay, so we had a fellow from our office send takedown requests. Okay, and each and every one of these requests that he sent were flawed in one way or the other. Okay, so in some cases, because the law says that you have to be an aggrieved person. In some cases, he did not say that he was an aggrieved person, that how this affected him. Okay, so in some cases, he just said that this is there and sent. Okay, in some cases, he asked for ridiculous things to be removed. Okay, in all cases, actually, what he asked to be removed was perfectly, normal speech, stuff that shouldn't have been removed. But in one case, for instance, he asked for ads, okay, because one of the requirements of this is that anything that is harmful to minors shall not be hosted by any of these companies, right? So he asked for an ad for what is it, convex something and all to be removed, and he was referring to baby diapers, and he said that because it causes these health conditions and those are harmful to minors, okay, so they cause baby rashes, okay, so, and he wanted that to be removed. So and in every case it was something as ridiculous. In one case he asked for comments on a newspaper, okay, the comments about the article was about Telangana. One of the comments was that this is something that politicians are doing. They're the only ones who benefit from this dispute. Ordinary people don't really benefit from this. Okay. Now that's a perfectly reasonable comment. Many of you might disagree on whether that is, whether that's an accurate summation of this thing, but you wouldn't say that that is something that is going to cause public order problems or something that deserves to be removed. Okay? Yet, we asked for that to be removed and realized that not only was that removed, but all the comments on that page were also removed. Okay? So what we found was in out of 7 cases, in 6 cases, the content that we wanted removed was removed, and in some cases more than that was removed. Okay? So we find that even though under these rules, the intermediaries can say, actually what you're asking for is ridiculous, we're not going to remove it. But if they do so, what happens is they can be dragged to a court. So the point of having the law in India under Section 79 basically implements a state of intermediary non-liability, that Facebook is not responsible for what you say. Okay? If what you say causes a problem, then you are responsible for it and not Facebook. Okay? Now this is slightly different from how, for instance, the offline world we treat these things. We sometimes hold editors responsible for what their softwares have written. Okay? But that law also has that kind of an exception. It says that if it is something that automatically happens, then they aren't responsible. But if they've actually modified, okay, what the content is, or if they've done anything of that sort, okay, then they can be held responsible. So it's not it's a fair law in my opinion. Okay, it holds them responsible if they contributed to what was said, okay, and it doesn't hold them responsible if they don't. But what this intermediary rules does is that it inverts that. It holds them responsible by default. Okay? And then they have to go to court and show that they're not responsible. So which is the reason so many of them decided not to dispute it and just to remove the content. It's easier. Okay? Because who knows? If they don't remove it, you might actually drag them to court or something ridiculous. Okay? And the court might say, wait a second, because you didn't remove it, okay, when you had the choice, we'll hold you responsible for it. Okay, and that shield is removed by this law. Okay, so that's a big problem. Okay, and the policy sting operation that CIS did is more or less as you realize, the only way that we can actually find out what's happening, okay, or whether anything has been removed. Because another seeming problem is that all of this is not reported anywhere. Okay? At least now the government knows what websites are blocked. Okay? But if someone does it under the rules, even the government doesn't know. And all the ISP, and there are so many intermediaries, there are ISPs, there are millions of websites. You can't possibly send RTIs to any of them, and anyway they don't come under RTI. How will you find out? Okay? And interestingly, none of these people who removed the comments, who removed the ads, who removed search results, etc., okay, none of them made any public notice about it. Okay? So And none of them told the government that they removed it because the law doesn't require that. Okay, so we've actually proposed a counter law which corrects many of these problems. Okay, but it's to be seen if that goes anywhere, and given that it's an election year now, nothing is going to happen anyhow. Okay, but the fact is it's all invisible, at least when it happens with books or films or anything else. You get to find out about it. But under this law, even the government doesn't know. Okay, and that is a big, big, big flaw in the system.
If suppose there is a content, say, which is inflammatory to some person, yeah. If there is a content which is, say, inflammatory to some person.
What is inflammatory to
inflammatory
some
as in
meaning?
if he suppose feels that it, say the one you said that any content can be removed by an intermediary. If say a comment I didn't like, I don't want it online, or I feel that it might disrupt the public order, I want it removed. So you are saying the intermediary removes it, right? So what if
Is required to remove it.
Right, is required.
Or is incentivized to remove it at the very least.
What if a web page in itself, what if some person feels that the web page in itself is also needed to be removed? Is that also possible?
Sure, because it doesn't put any kind of restrictions on what can be asked. You can ask for 10,000 websites to be removed. If all of them are hosted on a single server, you can say all those pages must be removed.
And they are supposed to be removed.
So there's an incentive mechanism created under the law. If they don't remove it, okay, then the possibility is that they'll be that right now they have a shield which says that unless they contributed to it, okay, unless they were in any way modified the speech or anything of that sort, okay, they are not responsible. But the moment they choose not to remove it, okay, that shield goes away. Okay, so they'll be put in the same place as the person who spoke. So they'll, they don't care about your rights. Why should they? Okay, they make money by serving you ads in most cases. Okay, and that will happen anyhow. One person being lost isn't a big deal. Okay, so they don't. Whereas in case of a newspaper is unable to operate if one of its journalists isn't able to report. Okay, so newspapers have a much higher level of incentive for fighting these kinds of laws than any ISP or any internet company. Okay, so. Sorry, there was a question this side.
There are websites which send notices to people when their content has to be removed. Like Facebook does send notice to the user.
Sure.
Or removes it, then sends the notice, and if the reply is, they feel it's justified that the
So in that only happens under some kinds of cases. So some intermediaries proactively step up and say, whenever we remove some content, the person whose content it is should, know about it. Facebook does not send prior notices. Facebook sends post fact notices. Okay. So on the other hand, there are some laws, such as the law relating to copyright. In the US, the DMCA requires them to send a notice, okay, before removing it. Okay. So that's the notice and takedown system. Okay, and so that's something that also is done. But for normal content, even in the US, okay, in the US they're given much stronger protections under their law. Okay, something called 512 of the Communications Decency Act, and which provides them a much stronger shield. Okay, and because of that, you find that those websites are in a better position to say, no, we won't remove the content. But they're in a worse position when it comes to copyright. Okay, because they carved out an exception from that specifically for copyright, and which I'll talk about later in the evening. So.
Can somebody take that now?
Sure. So here's the thing. they can take it, but they can take it down from multiple ways, right? They can contact the block provider, they can contact the ISPs, all the ISPs in India, they can contact the domain name provider, okay, who's providing the name for the blog if you are hosting it on your own name. Okay, they can contact so many different intermediaries. They don't even have to come to you to remove it. They can go to any of these people, okay, and get it removed. What we are proposing is that if it is content, they should first go to the person who's in the best position to remove it. So they should first come to you, or they should first go to the host, etc. They shouldn't, for instance, block a web address, okay, when they want to remove one sentence. Okay, that just does not make sense. Okay, so that kind of a principle is not there in our law. Okay, and this law is severely flawed. So every example is like one more flaw in the law.
How can spam be addressed here? It's like if
This doesn't talk about spam. This law, the one kind of thing it doesn't prohibit is spam. So.
So, I mean, that should be, in fact, that's probably one reason why they don't get to the user, because it's like many a times user can't be traceable.
Sorry, I didn't get that. Can you just?
The user
Yeah.
who's behind posting all this, for example, this Northeast Exodus that happened.
Yeah.
So there were like lots of messages and nobody knew who was sending them, where is the...
No, when I got an SMS, I know who sent it. Right, as in, did you ever get an SMS in which...
No, I didn't get any,
Okay.
and they were planning to ban Twitter and Facebook, planning to, but it didn't happen.
So I'll come to the next point quickly since we are gotten into this issue. Okay, sure.
Do they verify the content before being removed?
Does who verify the content?
Suppose I request...
The intermediary.
Not. The authority.
There is no authority involved in any of this, which is why they don't know what's been blocked.
Probably you may be knowing that.
Yeah.
UGC on IIPM.
Yeah.
That content was 70 around 80 ISPs, sorry, 80 websites were requested to remove the content.
No, what had happened was that no one was requested to remove the content. What came about was an order from the court to block content, okay? So there's a subtle difference between removing content and blocking content, which is again the kind of difference that I pointed out. So if you're in a position to press a delete button and remove the content, I think that's a far better way of dealing with it. Someone writing directly to the offending content, writer and say like, this is offensive for this reason, then try it. If that doesn't work out, try something else. Or if it's something that has to be done, if the person anyway is not going to remove it, or if the content is illegal, then file a file a police complaint, go with the complaint to the provider, etc. There are many ways of doing this. But in the UGC case, what happened was again, the court passed an order asking for all for the Department of Telecom basically to get all ISPs to block all of this. Okay. Now that was a district court. Okay. In Gwalior, from what I remember, that did this. And it was, that also goes to show another problem with the larger legal system. Okay, that there is no real oversight mechanism. It can have, they can be pro free speech, but at the lower district court levels, they actually, very often you are faced with bad judges who don't, bad magistrates who don't understand the importance of freedom of speech, who might not even know the relevant Supreme Court rulings on this, or might fail to apply it properly, might fail to, as we saw, even go through the list submitted to them properly, because it included official government websites. Okay, so when you have such a situation, it's very, it's difficult. And the fact is that they did that is a good thing. Okay, because at least, because it was a court thing, because it was leaked to one or two reporters, people found out. Okay, but otherwise, imagine if it had been done under this law, okay, under the intermediary guidelines rules, no one would have found out until you keep going to the UGC website and you can't find it, and you'll wonder how is that happening or something. So it's that at least allows for some amount of accountability. This allows for none.
Something removed from government website, say, or
Yeah.
any other website, okay, it's almost like misleading public, right?
Of
Because
course.
they have notified it.
But how is that a offense under
So-
Indian law? As in, misleading the public is not an offense, and frankly, it shouldn't be either. Okay, like as in there can't be a law saying you can only tell the truth. Okay, because then you'll have some judge saying whether that's the truth or not. You might actually believe that's not the truth, but so we can't have that kind of a law either. Okay, but intentionally misleading the public. Okay, for instance, in such a way that if you report that that a building is has been hit by something and like it's breaking down, or that a bridge has collapsed, or if you say that something is fine but then the bridge collapses, okay, those kinds of things are actionable, okay, but not just misleading the public generally. So, excellent question. So this is the one way in which the web is much more resilient to censorship, right? That and good censorship and bad censorship. Any kind of thing that gets taken down, you can, as long as you have a copy of it yourself, you can still upload it somewhere else. Okay, so which is what happened with Asim Trivedi, right? The cartoonist who was arrested in September 2012. The case was originally filed against him in December. Okay, and before before he found out about the case, okay, he found out that he couldn't access his own website. His website was called cartoonsagainstcorruption.com. But in September, if you tried to access it, you would have had to go to cartoonsagainstcorruption.blogspot.in. Okay, he shifted it from his own domain, which a company called Big Rock, okay, removed. They didn't have to. The Mumbai police contacted them, the cyber cell contacted them, and they decided not to actually fight for his rights. They could have chosen to do so, because eventually the case is, in my opinion, going to be thrown out. He's out on bail, and I don't think it holds any water. Okay, but the company decided not to do so, and in this way, we are often better off with foreign providers, in my opinion. Okay, the Googles of the world actually do much more to fight for your ability to put up something. The indie medias of the world, okay, which are, so if you have an aversion to corporate interests, okay, go to indie media or go to collectives like that, in which say are much more intolerant of people asking them to remove content. Okay, and so that's a choice, and as a provider and as a web hosting provider, it's a difficult choice to make, because sometimes what you get a request to remove is something that ought to be removed. Okay, so in those cases, you must have the flexibility to remove it, but when you do, there must be some kind of transparency. Okay, so you must have the flexibility to remove it. If it's illegal, then you should remove it. But generally, unless there's a court order, unless there's a government order, a book cannot be banned in India. Okay, but without a court order, without a government order, a website can be blocked in India. Okay, that's the large problem. Okay, so when politicians sometimes say that we must, the law of India must apply online as well, what we found out through this policy sting is that it applies much more online than it does offline, that you can remove content much more easily online than you can remove it offline. Okay, so that's a, sure.
If they have all these laws, why can't they just, why was there a need to produce another law or another bill which will, why can't they apply laws to online? Why was there a...
Okay, so I'll come to that right now. Okay, so you see, that's the last point in this. Whoops. Okay, that's the last one in this slide. Okay, how many of you have heard of Occam's razor? Occam's razor. So there's a special variant of Occam's razor, which is that, which is a simplicity principle. Okay, when you have multiple explanations for something, you should opt for that explanation, which is the most simple. There's a special variant of Occam's razor called Hanlon's razor, okay, which states, never attribute to malice that which can be attributed to stupidity. Okay, and this is somewhere where I disagree with many other people who are fighting for free speech online in India. Okay, that I actually don't think the government is trying to clamp down on free speech. Okay, I actually don't think they're trying to protect one party or the other from being attacked. Okay, because that, if they wanted to do that, then only the government would have the power to to block speech and block any kind of speech. Right now they're in a situation where the UGC website can be removed as well, right? And they're in a ludicrous kind of situation. So it's not by active design or malice that we're in this situation. It's actually by people not quite understanding what they're regulating, not thinking through the regulations. Because if you thought a minute about it, okay, as a bureaucrat, you would include one clause in it saying, when that is, whatever is removed, you'll have to report it to the central government or something, okay? Because right now, because that way they have, you can see whether the law is working as intended. Right now you have no, if you ask the central government, if you send an RTI to the central government asking them, how many times have the intermediary guidelines rules been used? They don't have an answer. They do have an answer for how many times has 69A been used, 66A been used. For all kinds of crimes, they have detailed statistics, okay, from across India. But if you ask them how many times has this law been used, they don't have an answer. Because they forgot to put it in. Not that they didn't want to know, not that, they're somehow trying to say that if government, servants find out what websites are blocked, then they'll go and visit those websites or something of that sort. Okay? But just that they forgot to put in such a clause. They could still, but now it's become a different kind of issue. Okay? They have issued multiple clarifications which hold no legal water. Okay? A rule is a rule, a clarification is a press release. Okay? So they've issued and they actually do release these clarifications as press releases through the Press and Information Bureau. Okay? So they've issued multiple clarifications about how they believe the law should be interpreted. Okay? But none of that is actually law. If they wanted, instead of issuing the clarification, they could have just changed the rules, because they don't need Parliament's permission to do that. Okay? It's the government that sets the rules, not Parliament. Okay? They could have just done that instead of issuing clarifications, but they haven't done it. Why? I'm not quite sure.
Why is it, are there no laws which govern freedom of access? And if it's never designed as a freedom of access issue, which is for I have a right to access any information that I want and interpret it as.
That's not actually entirely true. In many cases involving book bans, when the author is a foreign national, as was the case with James Lane's books, a book about Shivaji, the Hindu king. Okay, it was a freedom of access issue. Okay, that people in Maharashtra couldn't read the book. Okay, was the problem, and not that James Lane, who is not an Indian citizen and hence doesn't get 19(1)A rights, not that James Lane couldn't publish the book. Okay, so courts do treat it as an access issue, and in India generally it is also treated as an access issue, and the right to information and the right to speak exist, alongside each other. So if you look at the preamble of the RTI Act, you'll see that it does mention Article 19(1)A, the freedom of speech article. Okay, it does mention that as where this RTI Act comes from and why it is necessary. So, so it's a bit of both. Okay, true, it's usually painted as freedom of speech, but freedom of speech, in my mind, always also equals freedom to receive that speech. Okay, not just the freedom of the person who's saying it to say, but also my freedom to read it. Okay, so. And I actually think that's about it. I'm curious what. Oh, yes, and the last point before I wrap up is that while a lot of this has been, cozy theory, right? What Amartya Sen, for instance, has said about famines. Well, it on the face of it does seem true. Okay, empirically, if you look, okay, democracies don't actually have famines. Okay, but that hides another truth. Okay, which is that sure, around 15 to 45 million people died during the Great Leap Forward. Again, during the 3 years of blight, right? But how many people die of malnutrition in democracies like India? Okay, how many people can't have full lives because of malnutrition in India? That's a very high number. Okay, and that, even though there has been no famine since 1943, okay, but millions have died of malnutrition and continue to do so, despite there being an opposition, political opposition, etc., parties, despite that being the case, despite it being the case that there is, for the large part, a very free press in India, okay, despite all of that, it still happens. So it's actually quite a bit more complicated to say that when you have freedom of speech, all these other problems go away. Okay? Freedom of speech can be seen as a minimum that you must have, but it's not a sufficient condition to have these other problems go away. Okay, so I'll just end it with that. Any further questions? We can actually circulate that. I can send it to Srividya or Nirmita to send it to you folks. So if you want some of that, there's one of these posters. Okay, will depict this poster over here, intermediary liability and freedom of speech. In this poster you see what the existing system is, current mechanism, and what we've proposed instead. Okay, and what the problems of the current laws are and what we have sought to redress. Okay, so do come up here and have a look at this poster. Any other questions? Most definitely, yes. And I think it's time for lunch. I shall not keep you away from lunch a moment longer. When do we get back, according to schedule? 2 o'clock, right? And is there any special request for any activity or anything going on? So when should everyone congregate? 2? Okay, so in that, sorry? Okay, can we please be back here by 1:55 p.m.? Okay, so 5 minutes to 2, because I believe there is an activity planned. So, okay, thanks.